The sun was setting as I walked out of the office building. My personal belongings packed into a small cardboard box. The weight of it seemed to increase with each step, a physical manifestation of the burden I now carried. The words still rang in my ears, sharp and cutting.
"We've hired an Ivy League graduate to replace you. You're fired, dropout."
I had always outperformed everyone else at the company, yet Richard Powers, our Ivy League educated director who valued a degree above all else, decided to fire me and hire a Harvard graduate instead. "This is completely unfair," I protested, my voice echoing in the suddenly silent office. Richard's face turned an angry shed of red as he spat back.
"Unfair? The only unfair thing here is a dropout like you daring to talk back to an Ivy League graduate like me. You have no respect for your superiors and can't do anything but argue. Your termination is final. Pack your things and get out."
With that, Richard shoved my shoulder and stormed off, muttering,
"You're in my way. Move it."
Something inside me snapped. The injustice of it all, the blatant discrimination, the sheer arrogance. It was too much. As I watched Richard's retreating back, a fire ignited within me. If that's how they want to play it, I have my own plans. I'll show them what a dropout can really do. And so, I set a certain plan in motion. My name is Ethan Walker. Due to my father's work, I spent much of my childhood living overseas. It wasn't the typical American upbringing, but it shaped me in ways I'm only now beginning to appreciate. We moved to Germany when I was 5, then back to the States when I was 10. By middle school, I was off to another country again. It was a hectic childhood, to say the least. Each move felt like being uprooted, forced to adapt to new surroundings, new cultures, new languages. Moving abroad at such a young age, barely able to speak English, was challenging. I couldn't understand why people couldn't understand me, or what they were saying. The concept of a foreign language was baffling at first. I remember standing in the middle of a bustling German street, surrounded by the cacophony of unfamiliar sounds, feeling utterly lost and alone. But children are adaptable. I learned to communicate through gestures and body language. I became an expert at charades, my hands flying as I tried to convey my thoughts. It was frustrating, but also oddly freeing. I learned that communication goes far beyond words. As my nonverbal communication improved, I started to make connections with the spoken language. Gradually, I began to understand what people were saying. It was like a fog lifting, revealing a world of meaning I hadn't known existed. Speaking was another hurdle. Listening, understanding, and repeating. I did it all by feel at first. Sometimes I mispronounced words or used similar sounding words incorrectly, accidentally insulting people without realizing it. I still cringe when I remember calling my teacher Herr Furs, Mr. Fart, instead of Herr Kurz. The international school I attended didn't teach German fast enough to keep up with daily life. The formal lessons felt slow and stilted compared to the rapid-fire German I heard on the streets and in the shops. I ended up learning German on my own, with help from neighbors and kids my age. We play soccer in the park, and in between kicks and goals, I pick up new words and phrases. I started watching German cartoons, laughing along even when I didn't fully understand the jokes. Slowly but surely, the language began to make sense. By the time I turned 18, my family moved back to the States. By then, I could communicate fluently in German, and had even been working part-time as a tour guide for American tourists. It was a job that combined my language skills, my natural charm, and my knowledge of German culture. I loved seeing the tourist eyes light up when I explained the history behind the Brandenburg Gate, or shared insider tips on the best currywurst stand in Berlin. Back in the US, I faced a crossroads. Most of my peers were heading off to college, their futures seemingly mapped out, but I felt different. My experiences abroad had given me a different perspective on education and success. I decided I wanted to start working right away rather than go to college. My language skills were already useful in earning me money. I figured if I wanted to study something specific later, I could always go to college then. It was a decision that raised eyebrows among family, friends, and relatives. "But Ethan," my Aunt Martha said during a family dinner, her forehead creased with concern, "how will you get a job without a degree?" I smiled, thinking of the tour groups I led through Berlin's winding streets. "I've already got skills that are in demand, Aunt Martha. I can speak fluent German, and I got real-world experience. I think that's worth something in the job market." My Uncle Bob chimed in, his voice gruff but not unkind.
"The boy's got a point, Martha. Not everyone needs to follow the same path. Look at me.
I didn't go to college. I've done all right for myself. Their words of support boosted my confidence. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. So I decided to enter the workforce. Thanks to my extended stay in Germany and high scores on an international communication test, I landed a job in the translation department of a major publishing company. It felt like a perfect fit, a way to use my language skills in a professional setting. Sometimes I work on translating magazines I used to read in Germany, which brought back fond memories of my time there. I'd smile as I translated articles about Oktoberfest or the latest Bundesliga matches, remembering the sights, sounds, and smells of my second home. My job was divided into 3 main tasks: translating assigned magazines and books, doing secondary checks on other translators' work, and performing tertiary checks after the secondary checks were complete. It was demanding work, requiring not just language skills, but also attention to detail and cultural understanding. One day, while doing a secondary check, I noticed a translation error. The original text had 2 words that differed by just 1 letter, and the translator had mistranslated it. The English words had similar meanings, but different nuances. It was a mystery novel, so even a small mistake could lead readers astray. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. It was late, and the office was nearly empty, but this was important. I couldn't let it slide. I corrected it in red and continued checking when I found other similar mistakes. This book was being personally handled by our director, Richard Powers. Apparently, he was a fan of the author, but mistakes happen frequently in translation. That's why we have checkers. Richard was probably just tired. Not thinking much of it, I submitted the proofread manuscript to Richard the next morning. Richard frowned as he received it, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages.
What's with all these sticky notes?
He demanded, his voice sharp. I blinked, taken aback by his tone. Those mark mistranslated sections. I can correct them myself before the tertiary check if you like. I offered to take on the corrections myself, thinking he must be busy, but Richard slammed the manuscript on the desk, making me jump.
How dare you!
He shouted, his face turning an alarming shade of red.
Are you saying I made mistakes?
Huh? I stammered, confused by his reaction.
You dropout!
He spat the word like it was poison.
How dare a dropout like you try to correct me, an Ivy League graduate? How can you even open your mouth to me?
I couldn't understand why he was so angry. I knew he had a short temper, but I had no idea what had set him off this time. If anything, I thought he'd be grateful that I was trying to help with his work.
Listen here,
he continued, his voice low and menacing.
Unlike you, I graduated from one of the top universities in the country. I have years of experience and seniority, and you're telling me I made mistakes?
Well, I tried to explain, my voice faltering under his glare. If you could just look at the manuscript. Richard keeps me standing as he looks over the sticky notes, his lips pressed into a thin line. Then he snorts and slams the manuscript down again, making me flinch.
Yeah, I checked it just in case, but as I thought, your language skills are middle school level at best. There are no mistakes here.
But, I protested weakly, with your translation, it becomes the meaning of the word without the H.
Obviously, that was intentional,
he snapped.
This translation conveys the meaning better.
But then the original intent of the text is...
Don't talk back!
He roared, slamming his hand on the desk.
Are you defying me? You, a dropout and a lowly employee? If you don't like my methods, get out of this department!
I didn't know what to do, so I just silently returned to my desk, my cheeks burning with embarrassment and frustration. No one around me would make eye contact. The office was eerily quiet, the only sound the muffled tapping of keyboards and the occasional cough. What did I do wrong? In Germany, even seniors or teachers would be happy if you pointed out their mistakes, saying, "Thanks for noticing that." It was a cultural norm I had grown accustomed to, one that valued accuracy and improvement over ego. Maybe my approach was wrong. Perhaps communication in America is even more challenging than in Germany. From that day on, Richard's attitude towards me became even harsher. It was as if he had decided I was his personal enemy, someone to be crushed rather than a valuable member of the team. The amount of work assigned to me decreased dramatically. I wasn't even given checking tasks anymore. Instead, I found myself with long stretches of empty time, watching as my colleagues bustled around with their assignments. One afternoon, I decided to take action. I approached Richard's office, my heart pounding but determined to clear the air. "Mr. Powers?" I began hesitantly. "I have some free time. If there's any work available, please let me know." Thinking there might be a mistake in work allocation, I tried to subtly inform the director, but he just glared at me, his eyes cold.
"What are you talking about? You have your work."
Saying that, he pointed to a pile of cardboard boxes in the corner of the office.
"Shred all of these."
Huh? I couldn't hide my surprise. This wasn't what I had in mind at all.
"What? It's a simple job even a dropout could do."
His tone was mocking, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "But my job is translation," I protested weakly.
"Shut up! A dropout dares to talk back?"
His voice rose, drawing curious glances from nearby cubicles. I was shocked. The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. He was still holding a grudge over the correction incident, and now he was deliberately trying to humiliate me.
"Shredding is an important job too. Just do the work you're given perfectly."
He dismisses me with a wave of his hand, clearly not wanting to discuss it further. I gave up and returned to my seat, feeling defeated. As I sat down, I noticed my colleague in the next seat giving me a sympathetic look. "Ethan," Tyler's son whispered, leaning over. "Can we talk for a bit?" I nodded, grateful for any distraction from my current situation. I went to buy some tea from the office vending machine, while giving me a chance to collect my thoughts. As we stood by the vending machine, cups of steaming tea in our hand, Tyler spoke. "Ethan, if it's okay with you, could you do a secondary check on my work?" "Tyler?" I hesitated, remembering Richard's anger. "Is that alright?" He nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I got approval from the original person in charge, and they're actually grateful because they're swamped right now." Tyler handed me the file containing the manuscript. We're the same age and started working here at the same time. He's also a returnee, apparently. He lived in the States until middle school, but started working right after graduating high school. From my perspective, he's linguistically talented and very capable. Above all, I admire how hardworking he is. As we sipped our tea, Tyler's expression grew serious. "I heard from others that Mr. Powers has a strong belief in judging people by their academic background. I can't believe people like that still exist these days," Tyler said with exasperation. Apparently, when he first joined the company, he was constantly referred to as the high school grad. "I heard this company values language skills regardless of educational background," I mused, thinking back to my job interview. "But I guess it can't be avoided entirely." "I see." Tyler's shoulders slumped lightly. "My dad is in poor health, so I need to support my family. I don't have a college degree, so I thought I could make it with my English skills. I thought if you had a skill, you could succeed even without a degree. But just because I'm a high school grad, I'm not even given work sometimes. What's the big deal about college degrees anyway? It's like graduating from a good university gives you a free pass. Are college grads really that great?" Hearing about the unfair treatment he had received made me feel frustrated. It wasn't just me. This prejudice was affecting others too. Why are hardworking people looked down upon because of their educational background? Why can people with prestigious degrees lord it over others and ignore their own mistakes? In that moment, something shifted inside me. A determination I hadn't felt before took root. "Let's prove them wrong," I said, my voice low but firm. "Show them that degrees don't matter." "Huh?" Tyler looked at me, surprise evident in his eyes. "Sure, studying to work in society is never a bad thing, and it can be a strength. But the logic that you're a worthless person just because you didn't go to a good school doesn't make any sense." I declared that I would check Tyler's manuscript by tomorrow. Then I suggested we take on work from people who seem busy. "If you say so, Ethan." Tyler's voice was hesitant, but I could see a spark of hope in his eyes. "I'll do my best." "Tyler, you're already doing your best," I assured him, clasping his shoulder. A slow smile spread across his face. "I'm happy to hear you say that. All right, let's work hard enough to prove Mr. Powers wrong." From then on, we tackled work as a team. It wasn't easy. We were both juggling our regular assignments along with the extra work we had taken on. But there was a sense of purpose to our efforts now, a shared goal that drove us forward. Tyler would take on work from overloaded colleagues, and I would distribute and schedule it. We developed a system, dividing tasks based on our strengths and covering for each other's weaknesses. Late nights became the norm, but neither of us complained. We were too focused on our mission. We managed to submit everything 3 days before the deadline, a feat that didn't go unnoticed by our colleagues. There were whispers of admiration, nods of approval. We were making a difference, and people were starting to see it. A month later, the whole department seemed more relaxed. The constant stress and pressure had eased, replaced by a more positive atmosphere. We received praise from the sales and printing departments, who noted the improved quality and timelines of our work. Even within our departments, everyone except Richard acknowledged that it was thanks to Ethan and Tyler. Our colleagues would stop by our desk, offering words of thanks and encouragement. "Guys are lifesavers," Sarah from marketing said one day, dropping off a box of donuts. "Keep up the good work." But Richard remained unmoved. If anything, our success seemed to irritate him even more.
"So, the dropout and high school grad are playing best friends?"
He sneered one afternoon, passing by our desk.
"Pathetic that it takes two of you to do one person's job."
I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that we were doing far more than one person's job. But before I could say anything, Richard continued.
"Huh. You're usually just dragging us down. This is the least you can do."
He continued to refuse to acknowledge our efforts. I don't know if he can back down after looking down on us once, or if he's still discriminating against us, but it seems I won't be getting work directly for him for a while. Well, that's fine. We can do the work. Plus, everyone else in the department recognizes us and gives us worthwhile tasks. We can play this game of chicken and see who gives in first. However, the director made his move before we could. It was a typical Tuesday morning. The office was buzzing with activity, the sounds of keyboards clacking and phones ringing filling the air. I was deep in concentration, working on a particularly tricky translation, when I heard Richard's voice cut through the noise.
"Tyler, when will you finish the job ordered by Sakura Company?"
I looked up to see Richard standing at Tyler's desk, his arms crossed and a smug expression on his face. Tyler tilted his head in confusion, his brow forward. The deadline for that is exactly 1 month from today, right? I'm planning to submit it the week after next.
1 month from now? What are you talking about? The deadline is today.
What? Tyler's eyes widened in shock. I watched as he frantically checked the work schedule on his computer screen. No, it says 1 month from now. It's written here, and in the email from you, Mr. Powers. Richard's smile turned predatory.
Oh? But in the previous email from the client, today's date is written, isn't it?
Tyler stammered, his face paling. Peeking over, I could see the original email indeed had today's date written on it. However, in Richard's email quoting that message, the date was written as 1 month from now. A transcription error? No, this felt deliberate.
Come on, you didn't even check the client's email?
Richard's voice dripped with disdain.
This is why high school grads have no common sense.
My blood began to boil as I realized what was happening. Richard had intentionally given Tyler the wrong date. This wasn't just incompetence or oversight. It was sabotage.
Anyway, deliver it by the end of today.
Richard continued, his tone casual as if he hadn't just dropped a bombshell.
It's a big contract, you know.
Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. But that's impossible starting now.
Then what are you going to do about the delivery? Do you think an apology will suffice?
Richard's eyes glinted with malice.
Yeah, I know you have to take responsibility and quit.
I couldn't stand it anymore. Before I knew it, I was on my feet, confronting the director with Tyler between us. Wait a minute, I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. This is primarily your fault for giving Tyler the wrong date, isn't it, Mr. Powers? Sure, Tyler might have shared some blame for not double-checking, but the main responsibility lies with you. Richard's face contorted with rage.
You dare talk back to me again?
It's not talking back, it's pointing out a fact.
That's what talking back means!
Richard bellowed, his face turning an alarming shade of red.
This is why dropouts...
Dropout, so annoying. Academic background has nothing to do with this. I ended up shouting, my patience finally snapping. Richard's attitude changed completely, and he raised his voice to match mine.
See? Dropouts lose their temper so quickly. You're the epitome of stupidity. No respect for your superiors, you scum. You should quit too.
That's That's ridiculous! I sputtered, hardly believing what I was hearing.
Shut up! You're both fired!
Richard roared, spittle flying from his mouth.
Massive financial loss, disrupting the department's discipline, disobeying superiors. I have plenty of reasons.
The office had gone deathly quiet. I could feel the eyes of every colleague on us, but in that moment, all I could focus on was Richard's triumphant sneer. Saying that, Richard picks up the internal phone to call someone. My heart was pounding in my ears as I watched him dial, a sick feeling growing in my stomach.
Powers here. About those 2 employees I mentioned the other day.
There was a pause as he listened to the person on the other end.
Oh, is that so? That's great. Yes. I'll talk to you later then.
Richard, who hung up the phone looking pleased, now addresses us in a good mood. The sudden shift in his demeanor was jarring.
Perfect timing. I've just been told that we decided on a candidate to fill the holes you 2 will leave. An elite of elites who graduated from Harvard. You 2 may have lived abroad, but I bet you only know casual conversation. The person coming in has properly studied linguistics, knows how to use it, and is well versed in the rules of being a working adult. They'll do the work of 2 of you, no, 10 of you.
We were speechless at the sudden announcement. The unfairness of it all, the blatant discrimination, the sheer arrogance. It was overwhelming. Taking advantage of our silence, Richard continued, his voice dripping with satisfaction.
Even if a bunch of losers who didn't even take college entrance exams got together, you're no match for an elite. If you understand, then hurry up and clear your desk.
In the end, Richard had told the HR department all sorts of things, true and false, and we were both fired. It was a whirlwind of paperwork and stern talks from HR representatives who seemed more interested in protecting the company than hearing our side of the story. On our last day at the company, as we left the building, Tyler bowed his head to me. The weight of our personal belongings in cardboard boxes seemed to mirror the heaviness in our hearts. Ethan. Tyler's voice was thick of emotion. I'm really sorry, 'cause you stood up for me. Please don't apologize. I cut him off, my voice gentle but firm. The ones at fault are Mr. Powers and the company for not investigating the facts. Tyler laughed weakly, but there was no humor in it. What should I do now? A high school grad like me, I doubt I'll find a place that will hire me quickly. He said this while staring blankly at the distant sky, his eyes reflecting the setting sun. In that moment, he looked so lost, so defeated. But as I watched him, an idea began to form in my mind. No, more than an idea, a vision. I made up my mind. Now was the time. Tyler, I said, my voice steady and determined. If you're interested, I have an idea. Would you like to hear it? Tyler turned to me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. An idea? I nodded, feeling a surge of excitement despite our current situation. Yes, it's risky and it won't be easy, but I think together we could do something amazing. As we walked away from the office building that had been our workplace, I began to outline my plan. With each step, the weight of our boxes seemed to lighten, replaced by the growing potential of our future. A few days later, my smartphone showed over 10 missed calls. I'd only looked away for a few minutes. As I stared at the list of calls from the same number, the screen changed to an incoming call. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I finally answered. Thank you for calling. This is Walker.
Walker!
The voice on the phone was the all-too-familiar voice of Richard Powers. Even through the phone, I could hear the barely contained fury in his voice.
You! Don't think you'll get away with this!
I kept my voice calm and professional, despite the satisfaction I felt at hearing Richard's distress. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're talking about. Please state your business first.
The clients are all saying the same thing. If you're not there, they'll terminate their contracts.
A smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. So it was working. Is that so? Mr. Powers, weren't you the one who fired me?
That's not the issue here.
Richard sputtered.
They're saying they'll give their business to your company.
Yes, I know. I received several contract notifications yesterday. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. When Richard spoke again, his voice was trembling with rage.
You dare steal our clients?
Isn't that the client's decision? I countered, my voice steady. Besides, As I said before, you were the one who fired me, Mr. Powers. After being fired because of Richard, I had to start a small translation company. It was a bold move, born out of necessity and fueled by a desire to prove myself. And before I left, I had already informed the client representatives that I was going independent. Richard had fired both Tyler and me, who were handling most of the secondary and tertiary checks. Of course, this caused internal operations to stall. They had to rush to meet deadlines and deliver products of insufficient checks. Even the Harvard graduate, while talented, was struggling to keep up with the unfamiliar task. Apparently, they were especially having trouble with specialized terminology. Richard was constantly receiving complaint calls from clients who were suspicious of the situation. The quality they had come to expect was no longer there, and they weren't shy about voicing their dissatisfaction. And the clients who cut their contracts because they couldn't trust a company that had lost credibility contacted my company. They praised our previous smooth and appropriate translations and asked to work with us again, proposing new contracts.
Why would they go to a dropout like you?
Richard's voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. I paused for a moment, considering my next words carefully. Mr. Powers, have you not looked at my resume?
Huh?
The confusion in his voice was evident. I thought when you called me a dropout, you were only referring to my education in the States, but it seems that's not the case.
What do you mean?
Richard's voice had lost some of its bluster, replaced by uncertainty. I also graduated from Harvard. I was in an accelerated program, so my final academic record in the States in middle school. So it's not incorrect, but...
What?
Richard's exclamation was barely more than a whisper. I could hear the sound of keyboard typing through the phone. He's probably searching for my resume, I thought with a smile. Well, none of that matters, right? I continued. You look down on me as a dropout based solely on my title.
That's...
Richard seemed at a loss for words. It's pretty ridiculous to fire a Harvard grad, only to hire another Harvard grad, based just on academic background. I was trying so hard not to laugh at the time.
You!
The anger was back in Richard's voice, but it sounded weaker now, more defensive than aggressive. But I'm grateful, because I learned something important.
Something important?
Richard's curiosity seemed to get the better of his anger. Yes, that clients don't do business based on academic background. I haven't revealed my educational background to any of them. They all trust and value me based on my enthusiasm and the quality of my work.
No way!
Richard's voice was barely audible. Keep working with your highly educated, excellent personnel. I have an appointment coming up, so I'll have to end the call here. I decided to hang up without hesitation, as I couldn't hear Richard's voice anymore. As I put down the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was done. I had said my piece, and now it was time to focus on the future. A little while after my translation company, which I named Walker Translations Incorporated, got on track. I had the opportunity to have dinner with my father after a long time. It had been months since we last seen each other. I was both excited and nervous about the meeting. In an elegant private room of a Japanese restaurant I had used for business before, we poured sake for each other. A familiar ritual helped ease some of the tension between us. Ethan, my father began, his voice serious. Are you sure you won't reconsider? I took a sip of sake before responding. Sorry, but I don't have even the slightest intention to. My father's brow furrowed. Please, we need you in the company. It's troubling to have you beg like this, I said, feeling uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. If you don't come back to the company, it seems unlikely we'll be able to nurture truly capable people. You see, my father is actually the CEO of the company I used to work for. When I was fired by Richard, my father was away on an overseas business trip. He had returned to find the company in turmoil, with some of our biggest clients threatening to leave. Look, I was fired, I reminded him gently, by a director in your company, Dad. That's... My father trailed off, unable to find the words to defend the situation. If you're asking me to come back, you'll first need to do something about the HR department that followed the director's whims, and the board members obsessed with academic credentials. I don't think my father is directly at fault, but the company's responsibility is the CEO's responsibility. Being too busy to grasp internal affairs, that's no excuse. I'm really grateful to you, Dad, I continued, softening my tone. For taking me to Germany, for allowing me to take the accelerated program for university entrance, for being considerate so that I wouldn't be seen as getting in through connections. But I've realized that working in such a large company doesn't suit my style. It's important to gain knowledge from experienced people, but a rigid hierarchy doesn't suit me. The reason I got fired this time was because I intervened in Tyler's situation. If I see such unreasonableness, I'll speak up regardless of who the person is. If I lose my job for that, I don't want to be in that place. My father was quiet for a moment, swirling the sock in his cup thoughtfully. Then he looked up at me, a new light in his eyes.
Man, how about a business partnership?
Business partnership, I repeated, intrigued despite myself.
Yes.
He nodded, warming to the idea.
Your company probably doesn't have much name recognition yet. By cooperating on problems that can't be solved by a single company, we could achieve business growth together, couldn't we?
I considered his proposal carefully. It was an interesting idea, one that could potentially benefit both our companies. I could consider. But I quickly added, I have several conditions. I start writing in my notebook, laying out my vision for how this partnership could work. First, create a workplace that doesn't determine superiority based solely on academic background or age, but on ability. However, don't judge someone's ability at first glance, but provide opportunities for skill development and ability manifestation. My father nodded, listening intently. And? I hesitated for a moment before continuing. Strip Richard of his position, which was the cause of this incident. We can consider his treatment afterwards based on his reflection and efforts, but he should be demoted to a regular employee once to broaden his perspective. I presented several other conditions, all of which were accepted. I didn't make any unreasonable demands. I told him to point out if he thought any part was strange, but there were no objections from my father. As we continued our meal, discussing the details of our potential partnership, I felt a sense of hope and excitement growing within me. This could be the start of something truly revolutionary in the business world. And so, after completing various preparations, I officially became a business partner of my father's company. It was a strange feeling, returning to the building I left in disgrace just months before. But this time, I walked in with my head held high, not as an employee, but as a partner. The employees who had been kind to me before were happy to see me back, greeting me with warm smiles and congratulations. But Richard looked uncomfortable and wouldn't even glance at me. The tables had turned, and he knew it. I heard he voluntarily resigned less than a week later. Rumor has it that he couldn't bear the fact that I had become his superior. It seems his personality of caring about appearances hadn't changed.
The other day, I saw Mr. Powers doing traffic control for road construction near the station.
Tyler reported to me with a complex expression. We were sitting in the president's office of Walker Translations Incorporated. The room that had once seemed like an impossible dream, now a reality. I leaned back in my chair considering this information. He probably couldn't get a job in the same industry. Well, I hope this time he'll understand through various work experiences the academic background isn't something to be so proud of. When I started the company, I wanted Tyler to become the vice president and asked for his help. He had been hesitant at first, doubting his qualifications, but I convinced him that his work ethic and skills were exactly what we needed.
I still can't believe it,
Tyler said, shaking his head in wonder.
Me, vice president? It doesn't feel real. Or rather, it feels presumptuous.
I smiled at him, remembering how far we'd come. What are you saying? Our company values merit, right? Tyler, you're the one who can work harder than anyone else. You should be in a high position. We're successful now, and it's thanks to you. Tyler's face flushed with pride and embarrassment.
Thank you very much.
You don't need to be so humble, I said, chuckling at his reaction. Tyler's expression softened, and he looked at me with genuine gratitude.
My dad was recently discharged from the hospital, so we decided to go on a family trip for the first time in a while. This is all thanks to you, Mr. Walker. I don't know how to thank you enough.
His words touched me deeply. This is why we had started this company. Not just for ourselves, but to make a difference in people's lives. I'm the one who should be thanking you, Tyler. Let's keep working hard together from now on. Tyler's eyes shone with determination.
Yes.
He's still a very humble person, but it was because of him that I was able to perform well and gain confidence in my previous company. His work ethic and dedication had been a constant source of inspiration, pushing me to be better every day. As I watched Tyler leave my office, his steps light with newfound confidence, I couldn't help but reflect on our journey. Maybe it's not my place to say that academic background doesn't matter in work after all. I graduated from a prestigious university. The irony of my situation wasn't lost on me. However, those who should truly be respected are those who make efforts and achieve results regardless of their circumstances. Tyler was living proof of that. Academic background and family background don't matter there. What matters is the drive to learn, to improve, to push beyond one's limits. That's the kind of spirit I want to foster in our company. I want to create a company where everyone can think this way from now on. A place where people are judged by their actions and abilities, not by the name of their school or the connections they have. As I pondered these thoughts, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a potential client, a major international corporation looking for translation services for their global expansion. This could be our biggest contract yet. I smiled to myself. This was the kind of opportunity we had been working towards. It would require all of our skills, all of our dedication, but I knew we were ready for it. I picked up my phone to call Tyler. We had work to do. Over the next few months, Walker Translations Incorporated continued to grow and thrive. We took on more clients, expanded our team, and even opened a small office in Germany to better serve our European clients. One sunny afternoon, I found myself back at the Japanese restaurant where I had dinner with my father months ago. This time, I was meeting with a group of young entrepreneurs who had reached out to me for advice. As I sat down at the table, I couldn't help but notice how young they all looked. Their faces were bright with enthusiasm, but I could see the uncertainty in their eyes, the same uncertainty that I had felt not so long ago. "Thank you for meeting with us, Mr. Walker," one of them said, a young woman with a sharp gaze. "We heard so much about your success story." I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I'm happy to share my experiences, but remember, every journey is unique. What worked for me might not work for you, and that's okay."
We're especially interested in how you managed to compete with larger, more established companies.
Another young man chimed in.
It seems almost impossible to break into the market these days.
Took a sip of my tea, considering my words carefully. It's not about competing with the big players on their terms. It's about finding your niche, your unique strength. For us, it was our commitment to quality and our understanding of cultural nuances in translation. "But surely your Harvard degree helped open doors?" the young woman asked, a hint of dejection in her voice. I shook my head. "You might be surprised to hear this, but for the longest time, most of our clients didn't even know about my educational background. What they cared about was the quality of our work and our reliability." Their eyes widened in surprise. I continued. "Don't get me wrong, education is valuable, but it's not the be-all, end-all. What truly matters is your willingness to learn, to adapt, and to persist in the face of challenges."
Can you tell us about a particularly challenging moment in your journey?
Another young entrepreneur asked.
How did you overcome it?
I leaned back, memories of those early days flooding back. There was a time when we were just starting out, and we lost a major client due to a misunderstanding. It was a devastating blow. We thought it might be the end of our company. The young entrepreneurs leaned in, captivated by the story. But instead of giving up, we used it as an opportunity to reassess our processes. We implemented a more rigorous quality check system, improved our client communication protocols, and you know what? Not only did we win back that client, but the recommendation led to several new contracts. That's amazing, the young woman breathed. But weren't you scared? How'd you find the courage to keep going? I smiled, remembering those sleepless nights and anxious days. Of course I was scared. There were moments when I questioned everything. That's when having a strong support system becomes crucial. My partner, Tyler, was there every step of the way. We believed in each other and in our vision. That belief gave us the strength to push through the tough times. As our conversation continued, I found myself energized by the curiosity and passion. It reminded me of my own early days, of the fire that had driven me to start this journey. Before we wrap up, I said, looking at each of them in turn, I want to leave you with one piece of advice. Never stop learning. The business world is constantly evolving, and the moment you think you know everything is the moment you start falling behind. They nodded, scribbling notes and exchanging excited glances. As I left the restaurant later that evening, I felt a sense of fulfillment. If even one of those young entrepreneurs found inspiration in my story, it would all be worth it. Walking back to my office, I reflected on how far we'd come. From being fired and humiliated, to building a thriving company that was making a real difference in people's lives. It hadn't been an easy journey, but it had been incredibly rewarding. I remember the words I had said to Tyler when we first started. Let's prove them wrong. Show them that degrees don't matter. We had done more than that. We had created a company that valued people for their skills, their dedication, and their character. A company that gave opportunities to those who might be overlooked elsewhere. As I reached the office building, I looked up at the Walker Translations Incorporated sign, shining in the evening light. It wasn't just a company name anymore. It was a symbol of what's possible when you believe in yourself and in others. I smiled to myself as I entered the building. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and we would face them head on just as we always had. Because that's what true success is about. Not the degrees on your wall or the size of your office, the impact you make in the lives you touch along the way. And we were just getting started. 5 years after that meeting with the young entrepreneurs, Walker Translations Incorporated had become a leader in the industry. We had offices in multiple countries, a diverse team of talented individuals from various backgrounds, and a reputation for our excellence that preceded us. But more importantly, we had become known as a company that gave people chances, a place where your work spoke louder than your credentials. Tyler, now the COO of the company, had become a sought-after speaker at business schools, sharing his journey from high school graduate to top executive. His story inspired countless young people to pursue their dreams, regardless of their academic background. As for Richard Powers, I had heard through the grapevine that he had eventually found his way back into the business world. Surprisingly, he was now working for a small startup, having learned the hard way that titles and degrees weren't everything. My father's company, now in a partnership with ours, had undergone a cultural transformation. They had implemented many of the policies we had pioneered, creating a more inclusive and merit-based work environment. And me? I found myself spending more and more time mentoring young entrepreneurs and advocating for education reform. I wanted to bridge the gap between academics and the real world, to create a system that valued practical skills and character as much as theoretical knowledge. As I stood at the podium preparing to give a commencement speech in my old high school, I couldn't help but feel a sense of coming full circle. The journey from a confused immigrant kid to a successful business owner had been long and challenging, but incredibly rewarding. I looked out at the sea of young faces, full of hope and anxiety about the future, and smiled. "Your journey is just beginning," I began. "And let me tell you a secret. It's not about where you start, but how far you're willing to go. Your diploma is not a final destination, but a launching pad. What you do next is up to you." As I continued my speech, I silently thanked all those who had been part of my journey. Tyler, my father, even Richard. Each had played a role in shaping the person I had become. And as I watched the graduates throw their caps in the air, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. There was still so much to do, so many lives to impact. The story of Walker Translations Incorporated was far from over. In fact, it felt like we were just getting to the good part. After all, success isn't a destination, it's a journey. And what a journey it had been.